let's have a little chat about cardio. I hate cardio training as much as the next person, and we talk quite a lot about strength training in pole, quite rightly, because it's a strength-based sport. So strength training should be one of the main focuses of your training. However, cardio is a necessary evil, unfortunately. I'm going to explain to you a little bit about why cardio training is important for pole dancers, and then I'm going to give you some ideas about how you can incorporate some cardio workouts into your programming in a way that's really going to benefit your pole performance. Without going too much into all of the science behind it, although if you like geeking out on that kind of thing, then check out the blog because there's loads more information there. I'll just explain quickly that we have 3 different energy systems that we use when we exercise. The first one is called the ATP-CP system, and this fuels like really high intensity explosive movements. So things like maybe like a fonge or like a power spin or something like that. And it can only work for 1 to 12 seconds. So after 12 seconds, you're not using that system anymore. You're going to be using a different energy system. And the next system that you would use is called the Glycolytic System. And that can fuel activities that are really high intensity as well, but for a longer period of time. So that would be from like 12 seconds to about 2 minutes. And when it comes to pole, that will probably be the energy system that you would use if you were doing like quite difficult combinations on the pole and that sort of thing. And then the final system is the aerobic system, which fuels, which powers energy for continuous training of 2 minutes to like 2 hours. So this system you would use if you were doing floor work and stuff like that. So low intensity or moderate intensity training over a longer period of time. As I say, there's loads more information on that in the blog. But basically, when we do a pole routine, so like the ultimate goal of our sport is to do, maybe like a 4-minute long routine. So if you look at the energy systems that you might use, like I say, you would go through all 3. And we tend to do some floor work at the beginning, maybe. So we're using the aerobic system, then we might go into some like power moves and that kind of thing using the ATP-CP system, and then some glycolytic training, and then we might do some floor work to kind of recover using the aerobic system, and we might go back dip in and out of the other energy systems. So the reason why I'm going on about this, and the reason why it's important, is that to train for pole specifically, we want to try to replicate that in our cardio training. So if you train for like 60 minutes at a steady pace on a treadmill, you're going to be using your aerobic system, which, yeah, we do use in pole, but not that much. That's not how we train in our sport for the ultimate aim of performing in a competition. That's not really, that kind of training is not really going to help you. What's going to help you is cardio training that replicates the use of those energy systems, and we can improve how our body functions and how our body can recruit those different energy systems and make it more functional. Really interestingly, it's actually, oh well, you might not find this interesting, I do. There's been a study that just came out in January, I think, this year by an Italian, it was an Italian research paper, and that study showed that the physiological demands on a pole dancer are really quite high. It was a limited study because it was only on 1 person. What they basically did was they hooked a pole dancer up to loads of monitoring systems, so they could check things like a heart rate, blood pressure, the impact of different forces on her body, and blood lactate measurements and stuff like that. And they got her to do a 3.5-minute competition piece on the pole, and then they got all of the data from that to see what the physiological demands are on the body when you pole dance. As I say, it's limited, it was only 1 person, but there are no other scientific studies at the moment that I can find anyway on pole dance. That's the first one, and hopefully it's going to be the start of many more to come. It's quite an exciting time for the science of pole dance. But for now, we've got this one to go on. And that actually showed her heart rate was above 93% on average over the performance, and it peaked at about 96% of her max heart rate, which is really high. And they measured her blood lactate volume, which basically blood lactate is a byproduct of glycolytic training, the glycolytic energy system. So, and her lactate measurements were really high throughout the performance and afterwards. higher than those measured in female gymnasts. So it just shows how high amount of stress that we're putting our bodies in when we're on the pole. So if we can replicate those kind of conditions in our cardio training, it's going to help us our bodies to be able to deal with that. So what's the best way to do cardio training to improve your pole performance? Well, what we try to do is to replicate as much as we can the energy demands of a pole performance in our training. And what exercises do I use? Well, that depends. Obviously, to be super pole specific, you could train on the pole, which is great. But the only thing with that is that pole is a very skill-based sport, so we tend to spend a lot of time on the pole practicing, and there's a very high risk of injury and overtraining if we do that too much. So it is possible to train the energy demands in a similar way, but off the pole, so that you're not adding additional stress to your shoulders and everything else. I try to do, ideally, and this totally depends on what other training you're doing and things like that, but as an example, I try to do like with my clients, one session a week that's focused on upper body, and one session and 2 sessions that are using more leg-based exercises. So I do 4-minute blocks of work. So 4 minutes is roughly the length of a pole competition piece, and I go through all of those different energy systems that we would use. So I would intersperse really all-out max effort with periods of lower intensity recovery time, just in the same way that you would perform on the pole, but with different exercises. So the upper body workout might be rowing, so rowing intervals, or medicine ball slams, and that sort of thing, where you're using all out power. And then I'd do the lower body workouts using just general basic athletic movements. So nothing super fancy or sexy, just like high knee runs, sprints, speed skaters from side to side, using all different planes of motion, and they help to improve speed and agility as well. So yeah, and I'd do 4-minute blocks, and I would program either 1 to 3 of those 4-minute blocks in a session. So that's it. I hope you find that useful. If you want more information, check out the blog. If you've got any questions at all, then just give me a shout.